Welcome to the Artsy Raven, a show about writing, publishing, and the arts. With your host, the award-winning writer, editor, and publisher, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to this episode of the Artsy Raven, and our special guest today is Rachel Peterson. So Rachel graduated from Miami University of Ohio with an English degree in creative writing. Born and raised in Ohio, she started her career in advertising before spending nearly a decade in New York City as a marketing executive for technology companies. An avid traveler, Rachel now splits her time between Manhattan and the Midwest, where she lives with her husband Ken, their dog Olive, and horse Hope. So welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Jeff.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and like what happened? Like I mean, you were advertising and then suddenly
Yes.
became a novelist. So tell me how that works.
Yes. I have had a very winding road to life as a full-time author. So when I was little, I knew that I wanted to be a writer. This was the dream I'd had from the time I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. But I took a very different and long road to get there, which I think you probably hear from a lot of different authors. It's not necessarily a linear path. And so went to college, majored in creative writing. And when I graduated, which was around the 2008 recession, my number one concern was just, can I get a job? Any job, really, especially with the English degree. And so I ended up starting off as a junior copywriter at an ad agency. And this was also around the time that Mad Men was very popular.
Oh
I don't know
yes,
if you ever
yes.
watched it. Yes. So every man I worked with thought he was Don Draper, which was unfortunate because none of them were. But it was a time when advertising seemed to have a lot of energy and fun to it. It seemed like a very cool, sexy industry to be a part of. So I jumped into that and I worked in advertising in the Cleveland, Ohio area, which is where I'm from, for probably 4 or 5 years. And then a friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, I'm working for this high growth tech company. They have offices all over the place. The headquarters are in New York, but they have an office here and they need somebody to work on content for them." And I thought, that sounds like fun. That sounds like something different than, writing car commercials and tire commercials, which I was doing a lot of. I know a lot about a very strange array of subjects, thanks to my copywriting time in the ad world, but made the shift to technology, still with writing as that main focus. And that was kind of the theme throughout my whole career. I ended up moving to New York and working at the headquarters of that tech company, worked at a few others, worked my way up. I was a VP of marketing at a few different organizations before I exited the tech world. But the funny thing is that throughout that whole time, I never let go of the writing dream. And that's how you know that something is really meant for you, because even though I was outwardly very successful at what I was doing in tech, I spoke at conferences, I flew all over the world, I did all of these things, it still didn't feel like the thing I really wanted to do. No matter how successful I was in that thing, it wasn't what I loved. And I am fortunate because having done that for so long, when the time came that I finally got an agent and I wrote several books for many years before I actually became an agented author, which I think is one of those other pieces of the nonlinear path that no one tells you. The joke is sort of the overnight success that took 10 years to happen. But, got the agent, had that experience, started to really get interested in the publishing world, and then was at a point in my career in tech when I could say, okay, I'm going to step away from this and really focus in. And I had been working remotely anyway, which led my husband and I back to our home state of Ohio. And so we had the flexibility and opportunity to kind of take advantage of these opportunities. So that's how I got from Manhattan high rises, working in tech, to now being a full-time author with a horse who spends a lot of time at a barn.
Wow. Now, was it hard finding an agent? I hear that's what people struggle with a lot.
So I had a very, from what I can tell, non-traditional path to finding an agent, in that it only actually took about 2 weeks
Oh
from the
wow.
time I queried, which does not happen. And it then took almost 2 years from there to sign a
Yeah,
book deal, and
yeah.
not even with the book that I had first,
That you
gotten
queried
the
with,
agent.
yeah.
Yes. So I don't want to suggest that, oh, it
Yeah,
all just happens,
yeah.
like magic. But I will say that having worked in marketing for so long, when I sat down to start querying really seriously, I just put on my marketer's hat. I looked at
Mhm.
what authors, who did I love, who was a good comp for the type of work I was doing, what agencies were representing them, and then what agents within that agency were currently accepting manuscripts. So I essentially just made a spreadsheet, which is not a romantic way to look at it, but I made my spreadsheet, had my contact, I made notes about what specific keywords, they were using in their bios for the work they were looking for, and just pulled those in through my querying. And I ended up with 2 agents, coming back to me and being interested in the full manuscript and then signing with one. But I will say that gave me perhaps an unrealistic idea of, oh, people say this takes a long time. This doesn't take long at all. And then 2 years later, we finally, get to the point where a book is signed. So it's different for everyone. But I did find that organized approach for someone who, like myself, is actually not generally very organized. Just ask my husband. But that was a really helpful way to go about it. And it just helped me keep track of, who is most relevant to me? Who do I love? How can I reach out to them? How can I relate to them in the agent process?
Now, you said you wrote several books, so I mean, were they all thrillers? Is that what you queried with, or?
So the funny thing is that this book, Killing Sadie, my debut novel, is the first thriller I've written. So I wrote my first few books through college and kind of early adulthood, and I did those as part of National Novel Writing Month, which I know is no longer formally an organization, but I did it largely just to prove to myself that I could, because for the life of me, I had such a hard time finishing anything I started that was beyond, a 20 or 30 page short story. So I wrote 2 books for 2 consecutive years, a book in a month as part of that. And they were both dark romanticises. And so I wrote those, and I'm happy I wrote them because it proved to myself that I could write a book, but I didn't know what my voice was yet. They were in the third person. There was a lot of more descriptive, flowery language because that's what I thought I was supposed to write. And that's also what I really enjoyed reading. So I thought, oh, well, if I like reading it, this must be what I should write. And then I started to get a little bit closer to that thriller edge with the book that I did query with, which was more of a fast-paced adventure. So there were thriller elements to it, and it was the first book I had written that was told in multiple POVs. And that's what really felt true to me once I started writing in that manner, the stream of consciousness, how characters talk, that really felt true. So then from there, naturally, as my agent and I were working together, it just felt right to, okay, let's take this adventure idea and give it a body count. How do we turn this into something that is, as a style of writing, like something that you can really hone in on for a thriller?
Okay. Now, did you find it challenging to move from like your professional advertising writing to creative fiction? Like, I mean, it's both writing, but they're sort of different at the same time.
Yes. So I never stopped writing creatively as a hobby and a pastime, which I think really helped me. And that actually is something that helped me both in my professional life, because I often would get hired for jobs specifically because I didn't write like a marketer or write like an advertising person. I wrote like an English major. But then the funny thing is that it was very easy for me to keep up the creative writing for my hobby writing. But then when it comes to things now, like say writing a guest blog post, for example, I have a very hard time taking off my advertising and marketing hat. And I worked in not necessarily exciting industries, so the business speak was very straightforward. And it's funny because my husband, who will always be sort of my first editor, if you will, he'll read through, and we worked in the same industry, and he'll say, you sound too much like you're trying to talk to an audience of marketing executives and not like you're trying to talk to a regular reader like you. So that's where I'm having challenges now. But the creative side of it was always present for sure in my own writing.
Now, did you develop any habits or routines to help you transition from your corporate life into writing full-length books?
So I think the biggest habit or routine that I developed was actually something that I developed when I was still working full time. And that was simply writing 5 to 6 days a week, no matter what. So I very much used to be in the school of thought. And again, this falls into the romanticized idea of what writing is, that I would be struck by inspiration and I would hold myself up in a cabin somewhere and I would just write for 2 weeks and I wouldn't talk to anyone, and then I would emerge with this masterpiece, which, especially when you're younger, that feels like that's what you want it to
Hmm.
be. That's what a romantic idea of being a writer is. And then faced with the reality of working a corporate job, managing a large team, living in New York, having daily commutes, all of these things, I realized that if I wanted to seriously pursue this, I had to stop waiting for this mythical time when I would have the perfect
Hmm.
environment. And so I dedicated myself to writing for an hour or two, 5 to 6 days a week, not every day, because I find you benefit from having some time to percolate on ideas. But that was the routine that I started, and it did not matter if I felt inspired on a particular day. I would still sit down and start working, and oftentimes the inspiration would just find me as I went. Or sometimes I may write for a day, and then you go back to it later and think, you know what, that wasn't the best. We're not going to use that part. But establishing that routine really helped me because then that part of my life remained the same. When I left the corporate world, it was just that I could do it during the day with coffee instead of only in the evenings, after work.
Okay, now can you tell us a little bit about your latest book, Killing Sadie? Like, what was the initial spark for this book and a bit of a synopsis?
Yes. So this is a book told through multiple POVs, including Sadie herself, who we know from the start of the book and the title of the book has been found dead after a barn party, alongside a boy named Mason, who appears to have been her killer as well, before being murdered in self-defense by Sadie's boyfriend. So this is really a story about the different points of view, the different versions of the truth, and trying to sort through who is telling the truth, who is lying, why are they lying, as we go back and forth between Sadie's best friend Liz, her twin sister Jane, and her boyfriend Ben, before ultimately hearing from Sadie herself at the end of the book.
Okay.
Yes.
So the novel appears to be an open and shut case. Like, why did you think it was important to sort of, well, not trick the reader, but sort of, display that?
Yes. So the idea from it came in part from just my own experiences growing up in the Midwest. The book takes place in the Midwest. And I should pause it by saying there were no barn murders during my teenage years. I had a very well-adjusted, happy childhood and relatively normal high school life. But I was always fascinated with this idea of kind of the most extreme version of something. And also as a teen who was somewhat anxious, as many teens are, as many of us still are as adults, I always found a certain sense of comfort in reading about true crime, reading about these worst case scenarios, because it was a safe way to kind of move through feelings of anxiety.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where the idea of it started, that you take a seemingly normal situation, then just dial it up to 11. And it was important to me to present something that feels like it's obvious what happened and then discover maybe you're not so sure, because so much of the teen experience and even the adult experience is a group of people can all experience exactly the same thing, but see the truth of it in completely different ways, depending on their point of view, depending on their emotions, on their relationship to the person in question. And so that's what was really fun and fascinating to me, was to play around with these different reactions to something that seems very black and white. Like, Sadie is dead, Mason is dead, he killed her. That what else can there be? It feels like the end of the story, but actually it's just the beginning, and that's what was so much fun to write.
Okay, now you've lived in the Midwest and New York. Like, I mean, I'm Canadian, so I mean, is there anything that is quintessentially Midwestern that you think is different from, I guess, the northern states?
It's curious because what I have always said is, New Yorkers are kind. A New Yorker might not stop to say good morning to you on the street, but if they see someone struggling with a stroller to get it up the subway steps, anyone and everyone will step in. Midwesterners, and this is kind of a stereotype that I play with a lot in the book, are nice, but are they kind?
Mm.
Is the sort of question posed by the book. Now, of course, the Midwesterners I know and love, but it was fun to think of the Midwest as this place that people generally just stereotype as, it's the Midwest, everyone's lovely, everyone's friendly. It's just a almost simpler way of being, or the sort of romanticized way of being, in an old school American dream kind of way. And so it was fun to take that and say, in this place that seems perfect, where you would never expect a murder, you would never expect chaos, to bring it there versus, city environments where you kind of expect chaos because that just comes along with living in a very large city environment.
Okay. Now, was the most challenging thing, do you think, of writing this book?
Mhm. I think for me, the hardest part was managing all of the little details that are slightly different as you go, which does not give too much away, but I'm not by nature an extremely detail-oriented person. And so thank goodness for me that I had an editor and fearless team of copy editors who are, because there were all of these tiny little nuggets, and that's a hint to the reader, a single sentence that seems like a throwaway. It doesn't matter. This detail couldn't be important. There are these little things that change depending on who's telling the story. And
Mm.
for me as an author, having this whole mapped out, I probably looked like I was trying to solve a crime myself. If you looked at this board I had with, okay, this person is here, this person is here, they were really here, they're actually over here. It was kind of keeping all of that straight and then also making sure that it is laid out in such a way that we're keeping the reader guessing until the very end. But the other important thing to me is that they can go back and say, oh, if I go back to
Yeah.
that makes sense now. So making sure that there's a satisfactory conclusion for the reader, and also that if they want to, they can go back and find all those little breadcrumbs and feel like, oh, okay, I see the clues were here. I just didn't see it.
Now, for anyone that wants to write a thriller or a book, do you have any advice to give them?
I think the best advice I have is write every day. As I said, 5, 6 days a week, whether you feel like it or not, don't wait for the inspiration to strike. And then write from your own life experiences and things that you know. I think that's what really helped me bring Killing Sadie to life, setting it in a place like the place where I grew up and thinking about people I knew in high school, teachers I had, bonfire parties I went to, all of these aspects that were real parts of my teenage experience helped me connect to the story. And I think my advice for anyone who wants to write thrillers is start with that nugget of truth in your own life and then ask, okay, what if that happened again, but was supercharged? What if that happened at that, scale of 1 to 10 and it's a 12? And kind of go from there.
Okay, cool. So you're going to do a bit of a reading for us. Can you give us a bit of context before you start?
Yes. So we are actually going to begin at the beginning for this reading. I'm going to be reading from the first chapter of Killing Sadie, and we start with the point of view of Sadie's best friend Liz when she is sitting down to be questioned by the police the morning after Sadie's murder.
Okay, sure.
7:18 a.m., the morning after the murders. Sour Patch Kids. That's what I'm thinking about when the police detective walks in the door. He starts talking before it even latches shut behind him. I try to control the feeling of panic that rises up in me when I hear the click that tells me the door is definitively shut. It's just him and me, and whoever is probably watching us from behind a two-way mirror. This is everything my parents always said would end up happening to me. Well, everything my stepfather always said would happen anyway. Stuck in a police station, trying to explain myself to someone because of something terrible. He just always figured that whatever the terrible thing was, it would be my fault. Everything is my fault to him. They probably never imagined that the terrible thing would be my best friend's murder. And I swear I had nothing to do with it. The murder, anyway. But just because I didn't kill her doesn't mean it isn't my fault. She's why I'm thinking about Sour Patch Kids. My best friend Sadie is, I mean. She always called me Patch, a shorthand reference to the fact that there are two pretty extreme sides to my personality. I never minded the nickname. I've been called worse. State your name for the record, the detective is saying. Liz, I reply without thinking. Your full name? Elizabeth. The detective sighs in exasperation and looks at me like he's trying to figure out if I'm going to be a total pain in the ass or not. Then he seems to remember my best friend is dead and attempts a smile. It looks more like a grimace. I'm really in no mood for fake sympathy. Your full name, first and last. Elizabeth Amelia Stratton, I say, my own voice sounding foreign to my ears. When's the last time I actually had to say my whole name out loud? When I say it, my southern drawl comes through. We moved here from Alabama 5 years ago. That's when I met Sadie, on the very first day of school, when she asked me if my accent was real. I told her it was, and she promised she wouldn't let anybody make fun of me for it. It's not a promise she could keep, but I loved her for it anyway. When a friendship starts out like that, with one person sticking up for the other one, it never quite evens out. No one tells you that. At the sound of my voice, the detective visibly softens. They always do. Adults, anyway. Especially men. They look at me, and they see a cute blonde girl with big soft eyes and a southern twang, and they feel like they should be saving me from something. But there's a really wide gap between adults who feel like they should be saving you and adults who actually step in when they see something wrong. My Damsel in Distress Act has its benefits. Mainly, it helped me spend the last 3 years partying my ass off on the dime of guys who were willing to buy me and my friends a few bottles of vodka from the liquor store. It's not my fault they were stupid enough to think that we'd be drinking it with them. That was the sour side of the Sour Patch Kids joke between me and Sadie. She'd ask if it was going to be a sweet night or a sour one, and whenever I said sour, which was almost always, she knew it meant that we were going to get into some trouble and have a damn good time doing it. That's the version of me most kids at school know too. The party girl willing to put it all on the line for a good time. And that's who I was, at least until it went too far. I shake my head. Those nights feel like 1,000 years ago. A different girl, a different lifetime. It must have been a different lifetime, because Sadie was with me. Thank you. Should I call you Liz then, or do you prefer Miss Stratton? The detective sounds tired as he asks the question and plops down his tragic styrofoam coffee cup, forcing me back into the present. It's such a ridiculous question that I don't even bother answering him. I don't care what he calls me. I can tell just by the smell coming from his cup that it's more sludge than coffee. The sort you might be able to chew instead of drink. I work part-time as a barista at our local coffee place, and I've become a bit of a coffee snob. Sadie is always teasing me about my new cosmopolitan tastes. Another inside joke, considering that aside from coffee, I still have the taste of a girl who moved to Ohio from a trailer park in Alabama and created a new personality to outrun the old one. Because that's what I am. Sadie still teases me for that too, but in a loving way. Was always teasing me. Was. Past tense. Because the whole reason I'm here, staring down a detective who looks like he stepped directly out of life as an extra on a bad 80s cop show, is because my best friend is dead. She was murdered last night. Without warning, a wave of nausea hits me. I think I might be sick, I say. The detective grabs a plastic trash can from the corner of the room and hands it to me, and I empty the contents of my stomach. Can I have some water, please? I croak, trying to regain my dignity as I set the can back down. How on earth did I get here, vomiting into a trash can at a police station? It's a rhetorical question, obviously. I know exactly how I got here. How much did you drink last night, Miss Stratton? The detective asks. He's speaking to me with pity in his voice, like he thinks some guy at Trevor McLean's party forced little old me to down a few shots and shotgun a couple of warm beers. I don't drink. It's my automatic answer these days. Are you sure about that? We're not looking to get anyone in trouble for drinking here. I just need to know how accurate your memories are. Yes, I'm sure. I'm not worried about getting in trouble for drinking because I wasn't drinking. I really hate that I sound just as deeply annoyed as I am. Probably not a good look at the moment. I try again. It's true. I used to drink, but I stopped. Maybe 6 months ago. You can ask anybody. It was kind of a big deal. Everyone thought I was kidding at first. Anyway, I stopped, and that's all there is to it. Now, can I get some water, please? He gives me a look that suggests this part of the conversation isn't over. I hate when people do that. Look at you as if they just know they're going to outsmart you. As if they just know you're lying, and nothing you say is going to change that opinion. I'll get you water, Miss Stratton, and this doesn't have to be combative. I'm not trying to fight with you. I'm just trying to understand what happened last night. I know you and Sadie Cooper were close. We were best friends. Even I realize how juvenile it sounds when I say it out loud. But it's true. I instinctively reach for my half of the best friends necklace Sadie got for us last year. The necklace I literally only take off when I shower. It's been the one constant in my accessories ever since she gave it to me in a cute little purple box on the day after Christmas. I reach for it, but my fingers touch nothing. Then I remember. The necklace isn't there. It's gone. Probably somewhere in the endless fields of the McLean family farm. Probably gone forever. Just like her. And that's it.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel, for speaking to us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
The Artsy Raven is produced by Dark Heel Express. Introduction voiceover by Chris Gorman. Music by Tim Moore. Please access your bonus content on the Patreon website. Thank you very much for listening, and please stay safe.